So we were talking before the show, Heidi Presbella, about Donald Trump, and obviously he gets a lot of criticism from particularly the ideological pundits on the left and the right. And you were making the point that the more mainstream analysts and journalists and pundits, some of them you see as being pretty much in his corner.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to make a distinction between pundits who are transparently on one side of the ideological spectrum or the other versus mainstream newscasters who reach millions of viewers and who are before those viewers for hours on end. And to that point, anchors on stations like MSNBC, folks like Mark Halperin, these guys have taken Trump seriously pretty much from the get-go. I know because I actually co-anchored a show with Mark Halperin many, many months ago, and he said, look, watch this space.
So people who do that, or especially who did that last summer, last fall, when the conventional wisdom, at least among some of the, many political prognosticators, which Trump was a sideshow, he was entertaining, he wasn't going to go the distance, he might not even make it to Iowa, and all of that. So they often get accused of being in the tank for Trump. And I've run into some of this too. I mean, I'm not pro-Trump or anti-Trump, I just felt we should be fair to Trump. Didn't it kind of turn out, at least as of now after the South Carolina primary, that they had a pretty good point?
Yeah. I mean, when you look at a lot of the analysis that was out there, was Trump has a hard ceiling, and a lot of people, bought into that. But others who were looking at, what was going on under the surface and his potential to appeal to this, particularly the disaffected white working class vote, the folks who'd already been peeling off and creating this whole Tea Party movement that's grown up in the shadow of George W. Bush, those folks, that's what they were looking at. And it's really fundamentally a reordering of American politics that I think a lot of people just wanted to kind of revert to the same old formulas that we've applied to looking at these polls.
This is why I think it's such, in my view, an abject failure on the part of the media, because this is not just about getting the horse race wrong. Okay, early on, journalists said Scott Walker would be the front runner in Iowa. Jeb Bush, who lasted 3 contests, was pronounced a huge front runner because he'd raised $100 million his super PAC had, and we sometimes overvalue, I think, money. But in missing or downplaying or minimizing or mocking Trump, not just did many in the business get it wrong, but they kind of missed why he was becoming so popular. And it's not just his personality, it's that he's tapped into the anger and discontent and frustration of an awful lot of Republican voters.
Well, if you remember, Howard, when we first were blindsided by this phenomenon was from the very beginning when he came out and called for a wall and used these words like rapists and from Mexico and criminals. And everybody like, oh, you're out, see ya later.
Right.
And when in fact, if you really paid attention to what was going on in the tempo of U.S. politics, you would have seen that in 2014, that anti-immigration streak was really starting to come out. You saw folks like Scott Brown, a moderate Republican up in New Hampshire, of all places. What are they worried about? The Canadians running over the border? Really taking off with this message. So I think, yes, that we did miss that, and it wasn't until someone like Donald Trump came out and said it in such a brash way.
Right. So finally, do you think that some of these, what you describe as sort of the mainstream journalists and pundits, are being too generous to Donald Trump, or did they just see things that some other folks in the business failed to see?
I think he's getting a lot of coverage, and I think he's getting a lot of coverage for tactics. Okay, so I think the criticism of the press that we aren't doing our jobs in terms of diving deep into the policy details is legitimate. And it doesn't just go for Donald Trump. I think a lot of the candidates on both sides of the aisle, like with Bernie Sanders and some of his plans and how they're going to be funded, and on the right with Republicans and their deficit busting plans that they're proposing on tax cuts, we're not putting their feet to the fire.
This is a longer conversation because it is true that when candidates say controversial or incendiary or things that are going to make a great headline, we spill a lot more of that than we do to their tax cut plans. Great to see you, Heidi Presbella, and we're back here next week with more After the Buzz.